Yeah. Yeah, they're not going to be too happy about us blowing a shofar when
Their wedding. Yeah.
I'm not really sure what kind of wedding. Some of them look Muslim, some of them look non-Muslim, so I don't know.
It's an Indian.
Indian.
Is it Indian?
Yeah.
I'm thinking Indian.
That's Muslim.
They still might not like the
They
shofar.
probably would, yeah.
I'm not sure that he starts recording.
Do you know if they're recording each of them?
From my understanding, they're all being recorded and live streamed on the YouTube channel and then stored there. I don't know how good the audio has turned out on all of them because they're having to record the audio from in the room via streaming.
I was trying to remember if it was here last year.
Well, I came last year and she was here and I had to watch all the recordings and we were all great. There was a couple where it was too fuzzy because there was time issues, but like they all, if you watch the show, they're in it.
Okay, I guess I am going to start because it looks like it is live and he is recording. So, welcome. I'm going to get one more drink and pray, and then we will get started. So, yeah, we just give you thanks for this day and this conference and all the speakers and all the people here and everyone who made this possible. This has been a great time of fellowship and more revelation, more understanding of your word. We just ask that you would speak through me, help people to understand what we are about to show and more of your creation on how you created the human body and how it lines up with your word and your letters. And we just pray these things in Yeshua's name. Aleph body. So we have a nice little definition here. It's a mouthful. The Aleph body system is a Hebrew electromagnetic telecommunication system of the human body. The system is made up of all the basic building blocks of all creation, the Hebrew letters, which controls all the information for proper function, shape, form, and animation of the human body. So that's kind of a mouthful, but that is the quote-unquote definition of Aleph body. So, if we get into it, first thing we're going to talk about is telecommunication systems. So what is telecommunication? Well, that is the science and practice of transmitting information by electromagnetic means. And obviously you probably know by now there are hardwired ways to transmit information and there's wireless ways to transmit information. Most of telecommunication these days is all wireless, using radio waves and things like that. But a long time ago, we actually used to have telephones that some people in here probably remember you actually plugged into the wall and actually went across phone lines. But that's almost all but gone anymore. Even some of the wired stuff today doesn't even go through phone lines anymore. It all goes over internet lines. So, but in the body, you have the same thing. The body has its own telecommunication systems that transmit information and control living systems. You kind of have a chart over here of all the different points on the body. And this chart here is a mapping of all of the neural, well, actually, these are biochemical processes in the body. And this is just one slide. As you can see, it's
No, we can't.
it's kind of hard to understand because they kind of have it blown up. But what you're seeing would be like one of these little squares. And to have all of the chemical reactions of the body, this would kind of map the whole room, the wall. But all of those are a chemical function in the body, and they have all of these all mapped out. And every single chemical function in the body is controlled by the software of the body. So there is an energetic control behind each of those chemical controls. So what is this? It's a creationist understanding of Yah's design of the human body from a Hebraic energetic perspective. So this gets us right into Genesis. In the beginning, Elohim created Aleph Tav, the heavens and the earth was formless and void, and the darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was moving over the surface of the waters, and Elohim said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Wow, there's a lot there. In the Hebrew, actually, there's two Aleph Tavs. There's a Vav Aleph Tav, and then there's a Aleph Tav. And it's very interesting because this is where a lot of the sages for years have got the idea that the first thing Yah created was actually the Hebrew language, because Aleph Tav can symbolize a lot of things. Unless you've been taught more of the westernized Hebrew and you have the really in-the-box idea of Yah and a really in-the-box idea of Hebrew, and then people say, oh, you can't make that letter mean anything other than, no one really knows what it means, it doesn't mean anything. It's like, no, it does. There is a Aleph Tav, someone who claimed to be the Aleph Tav. So it's a person. It's a summary of all 22 letters, because it's the first and last. It's a summary of all his words. So, I mean, it means so many different things. And that's what's so interesting about Hebrew, and why you can't put it in a box, because one word can mean so many different things, but they don't necessarily contradict. Sometimes they appear to contradict to us, but in reality they never do. And it really gets quite fascinating. Yeah, a living word. So, I'm going to keep moving, but there's so many things we can talk about here with how there was movement first. The spirit of Yah was moving, and how he said, let there be light, and the word there is or, which was really interesting. One of the things I often mention is I use a lot of resources in my studies. I don't like relying on the Strong's concordances only, because they are so pathetically limited, and most of them have been very biasly created and very limited. But if you go to an etymological dictionary, I like Klein's of Hebrew, and you look at this word, it's really interesting, because it doesn't just say it's light. It will say air, and order, and form, and you're like, well, that's not the light that we think of. And in a lot of the rest of Genesis, you will see the word menorah, or a word which actually means like something that gives off light, versus this one. So, in my understanding of physics could be more in the realms of plasma physics, or what people would call the electromagnetic universe. I don't know how many people have prescribed to that view or have seen it, but I think the electromagnetic universe best describes how things work in science. And basically, what that perspective does is that they say that they can explain every phenomena through electromagnetic spectrum. So everything is a form of electromagnetic energy. And I think that's what Or is. I think Or is the ether, which actually does exist. All the greats knew about the ether. So your Tesla, your Heaviside, Steinmetz, Maxwell, these are all the guys, the reason why we have all the technology we have today. They were all the ones that developed all the engineering we use. And they all agreed that there was ether, that it has to be ether for there to be electricity. There has to be ether for everything to exist. So everything really is a form of ether. As it materializes and becomes more manifested and more dense, then it develops all these other forms of things. So I think the type of light he's referring to here is the aura, the medium in which everything else comes out of. That was a whole nother topic. So, what is it? Okay, universe. What does universe mean? Single spoken sentence. So, if a universe means single spoken sentence, Who spoke and what language did he use?
Wow.
If Yah spoke everything forth and formed everything from what he spoke, we should start to see the fingerprints of Yah's language everywhere in creation. And that's exactly what we're doing. I look at true science. So Brad Scott, who unfortunately wasn't here this year, I'm really disappointed. In my flesh, I see God. This is a great teaching of his, and he reveals how the design of the Hebrew language can be found embedded in all of God's creation, and he discusses how he calls it agrobiolinguistics. Yeah, that's what he calls it. I'm going to add to that here in a minute. I'm just trying to remember the order of my slides. But he also talks about the DNA and root words, and how cells are formed, and chromosomes and atoms, and how they all are structured a lot like Hebrew words. Really interesting. But I'm going to add in a word there. I'm going to add in the word mathematics. So Hebrew is also very highly mathematics. So you see Hebrew highly in agriculture, because a lot of the Hebrew words are about agriculture. A lot of Hebrew words are about biology, and a lot of it is mathematical. And Hebrew is a very energetic language because numbers are the language of energy. So everyone in here, I know there's a couple engineers in the room who do different types of engineering, and anyone who's in engineering or computers or anything like that, electronics, they know that almost all of it is numbers. We use mathematical formulas, we're always measuring in frequencies or wavelengths, it's all numbers. And that's because Hebrew is a number, and numbers are Hebrew letters. You can't really separate the two, unless you have too much fear to understand. So you cannot compare Hebrew with any other language. Letters are numbers, they are one and the same. What it is not, it's not Kabbalah, this is not mysticism, this is not New Age, this is not occultism. Ha-Satan didn't create anything of his own. So now we have to ask the question about counterfeits, because he's a great counterfeiter. So let's ask some questions. Have you ever seen a counterfeit $3 bill?
Yeah.
No? Why not?
There's no $3
You only counterfeit that which is real.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point.
Have you ever seen a counterfeit penny?
No, because it's not worth it.
Because it's not worth anything.
Oh, wow.
Does a counterfeit look just like the real thing?
Yes.
Is it the same?
No.
The truth and the lie look similar, but they are not the same. What does an anti-counterfeiter study?
The real thing.
The real thing. Studies the real thing, and if he knows the truth well enough, he can identify the lie. So I believe Ha-Satan uses counterfeits for two reasons. One, to mislead those who believe the counterfeit, and two, he uses it to keep others away from the truth out of fear. So whenever I see a counterfeit, I ask the question, what is Ha-Satan trying to hide from us? Instead of running away because of fear, and fear is faith in reverse, that's putting more faith in Ha-Satan's ability to get you. What's worse, you may even give credit to Ha-Satan for what Yah made and designed, and you could be grieving the Spirit. I see this all the time on Facebook with Hebrew people and the church. It's like, you might want to back down a little bit here. If you're calling something evil that he created because you're too dumb to understand it, you have a problem. Everything in the body is controlled by energy points and pathways. These points are related to the Hebrew letters and biblical principles. So the body works on laws of physics and mathematics. Our body is a temple, and it works based on all of Yah's laws. And I'm going to call this the Universal Torah, all of which he spoke. And by Universal Torah, I don't mean anything weird like Universal Church or any of that kind of weird stuff. But I'll explain it more as we move along. Did I just say what? Oh, they are mathematical and function much like telecommunication systems in the body. sending messages throughout the body for the proper manifestation and function of the human temple. Their function and meaning are similar to thematic interpretation, drawing a correlation between the meaning of the energy point and biblical meanings. Is everyone familiar somewhat with thematic study of the scriptures? It's where you study themes and chiastic structures. Tony Robinson, I think, is probably the top person in the Torah movement who teaches about it. It's very, very interesting. So you look at themes in the Bible and how the themes repeat, and these patterns that you find based on theme. And you can draw correlations between two completely different Bible passages or two different books based on common theme, and there's this chiastic structure that occurs, and it's fascinating if you haven't seen any of that stuff. But it's the same in this. Therefore, how we live is directly correlated to how each point functions, and thus how the temple will ultimately function. It's all built upon the universal legal system that Yah created and put into effect. So think of these things. Spiritual warfare is based on a legal system. Blessings and curses are based on a legal system. The ancient Near Eastern covenants are based on a legal system. Physics is based on a legal system. And your temple, your body, is based on a legal system. Some of these he's been given to us in the Torah. Or I should say the Torah is the legal system, but not just the biblical Torah, but all instructions that Yah spoke forth when he created the world. So obviously the ones that he's given us about how to live in his word, we call the Torah. Others we have discovered as we seek for his truth through the universe. We have things called the laws of physics. Some of them were actually laws and have been proven, and then we have things that are assumptions and theories that they try to make us think are laws, but they're not, because they haven't been proven. Now we are discovering a system in the temple, the body, that works along with everything else Yah created. And I call it the Aleph Tav body. So when you get in the Aleph Tav body, the best way to understand it is that there's primarily three categories. And if you can wrap your mind around these three categories, you have a very good start. And they greatly expand, of course. But there are cycles, energy cycles. There are energy points. And then there's energy pathways. Okay? So everything in the body gets divided basically into 7 cycles, which is very interesting. And they are based on levels of manifestation and families of similar frequency. Cycles are by far the hardest thing to explain because there's no one definition of them. They could be described as a category, like a category of frequencies that all work together. You can actually describe them as levels of depth. What I mean by that is you got your superficial skin, deeper skin, muscles, bone. So as the body becomes more and more dense, these are different layers. Different layers are related to different cycles. They're also like families of similar frequencies. So everything in the body will be grouped into one of these cycles based on how it works based on the family of frequency. And if we get into telecommunications perspective, cycles are like modulators. And if you don't know, in telecommunications, modulators are used to bring information together to shape it into a wave or a message to then send out. So that's what modulators do. They bring all this stuff together, they organize it, shape it, and then send it out. So that's cycles of the body. And then, of course, you have the energy points. These are the command centers of the body. And there are actually 26 active energy points on the body. And there's one inactive point. Each point is a Hebrew letter and shares similar symbolic and numerical meaning as the Hebrew letter. Meaning, if you look at what it does in the body physically, you're going to find it's directly related to the same meanings of that Hebrew letter and those numerical numbers in the scriptures. There are telecommunication command centers. They really contain all the information for the body. They do. They contain all the information for life to exist.
Why are there
Beyond-
26?
Huh?
Why are there 26 when there's only 22?
Oh, a good question.
Chromosomes?
Oh, we'll get to that in a minute. Have to see where. Oh, I think I know where. Okay. If not, I'll come back to it. Even beyond the DNA. So even the DNA information is ultimately controlled by these points. So if you could restore the points, you could actually restore someone's DNA. And I have seen DNA change. I've seen people with missing DNA with the DNA restored. It took a while, but through using frequency and Aleph body, we were able to make new DNA and genes. So it is actually capable. So there's really nothing you can't fix. It's just time and understanding and money and all those things that go into doing this the right way. Pathways. So there's 3 types of pathways. You got the primary pathway, you got the governing pathways, and you have the messenger pathways. Primary pathway is a 2-in-1. And it starts as 1, it divides into 2, and then it comes back together as 1. And it's literally called the breath of light and life primary pathway. And I'm going to get a little bit into the names later. The names were tested and verified to what the names are according to how he named them, because the book actually knows that. I'll get into that more later and how that works. So that's actually the first pathway of energy circulation in the body. It's 7th cycle, so it's purely light and spirit, and it holds the body together. And then it starts forming into the governing pathways. And the governing pathways, there's 3 of them, and they supervise and govern all the information and circulation in the body. And then that, it's kind of like a tree, so it keeps branching out and branching out. They're all technically connected. And as that branches out, it comes into the messenger pathways, which there happens to be 12 of them. And they are the broadcasting channels. So they are the channels that carry the information throughout the body. So that's the organization of how it works. So just an overview real quick. There's 26 points plus 1 inactive, which are the command centers. You have the 12 messenger pathways, which are broadcasting channels. You have 3 governing pathways, which are the governing supervising channels. You have 1 primary pathway, which is what connects us to the source, which is the breath of life. And then you have the 7 cycles of life manifestation, which are the cycle modulators. Together, these systems make up the bioenergetic communication systems, and they contain all the information for the formation and manifestation of the human body. In essence, each command center contains the human code, you could say, and broadcasts it through the body for the proper functioning of all organs and systems. It even contains the information for the DNA. Think of it this way. They are the backup system in case the information gets corrupted. However, only when these points are resonating correctly in phase coherence and the pathways are circulating correctly can they recreate the proper chemistry cells and tissues of the body. Which also means we have to be in line with everything he spoke, because he spoke everything from the same words. And since our body is made out of those same letters and same words, he spoke everything. If we violate his words, we're violating our own bodies. So the blessings and curses are already built into the fabric of the universe. We don't have to curse something or do something wrong and get zapped by him. It's naturally built in. So how we live our life will dictate how the body starts breaking down or being built up. The 7 cycles of life manifestation, I already said that. Yeah, I said that. Each cycle category level controls all items that are correlated to its own cycle. So you can divide everything into it. There's colors that can be divided into each cycle. There's emotions that are related to each cycle. There's specific organs related to each cycle. There's usually 2 pathways, 2 messenger pathways related to each cycle. And then they're related to different times, and different seasons, and different elements. So a lot of what came out in these other corrupted systems like Chinese medicine and chakras, those are all corruptions of what this original system was. So these pathways eventually become what is called the meridians in Chinese medicine. So meridians and chakras and things like those, they actually do exist, but they're much further downstream. So these are much deeper, and they control the others, not the other way around. So like in Chinese medicine, they come up with something like the 5-element theory, and some of it actually does overlap. However, the Aleph body is much deeper.
I have
Yes.
a question, and I don't know, I haven't read any of your books or anything, so this may be clear to everybody else in the room but me. But what
It's okay, I
is
don't have a
your
book.
personal view
I
on?
will soon.
Yeah, what is your personal view on like miraculous healings?
Yes.
So you're saying that everything that happens is already out there and it's a result of what we've done, God created it, okay. What is your view on miraculous healings?
Well, Yah can touch anyone, and he can just put all this information right back in order. And boom. Healed.
Thank you, I was just double checking.
I mean, he's the code master, so he just rewrites the code right back to what it's supposed to be, and boom. So this gets really interesting, and the numbers are symbolic, of course. So when you look at the 5 or the 7 cycles, what's interesting, let's start and go in reverse order. 7th cycle, it's kind of hard to read. I should have probably picked a better color. It says 7th is the light that holds all things together. So that is Yeshua. It is symbolic, or I would actually say Yeshua is the 7th cycle. So 7th cycle is light. And light holds our body together. Light holds the universe together. Everything is held together with light. So that is our direct connection to the Creator. In some systems, they want to say there's an 8th and 9th. I don't even go there because they have nothing to do with the human body. So we're only looking at the human body perspective. And in the human body, we can prove 7th cycle. We can prove the light that holds the body together. But that's it. If there is an 8th and 9th, that's all symbolic for the Father. And that's the source. For our body, 7th is the source. And that's the problem with when you get to the New Age stuff. They just make up stuff.
Yeah.
And if it sounds good, ooh, yeah, you know, and we're going to float in the clouds. Ooh. What does that mean? I don't know. Doesn't mean anything. It just sounds good. So there's really only 7. Now, when you get to the 6th cycle is where we see a lot of correlations between the spirit and the soul aspect of the body, which is really interesting because 6 is the number of man, but it's really the number of spiritual man. That's where you see the breath of life connecting into the light. And then you have 5 physical cycles. And it's really interesting when you look at the number 5. 5 seems to be the number of physical man, separated from the spirit. Because if you look at us, we have 5 fingers, we have 5 toes, you have 5 lumbar. 5 is the number of grace. 5 speaks to the flesh. The flesh needs the grace. So this number 5 seems to do with the physical aspects of the body, versus the 6 is more the spiritual soul, and then 7th is the light, Yeshua. And it's interesting what the river winds were speaking the other day, because they were talking about the sages and how they had 5 different words for, was it soul?
Yeah.
Or spirit? I thought that was really interesting. I was like, another correlation. And then so the 5 physical correlations is where everything gets broken down. So you will have points 1 through 4 in first cycle, and then 5 through 15 in second cycle, and 16 through 22 in third cycle, and 23 is in fourth, and then you have all these pathways, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. And obviously it represents the menorah too. Okay, so these points collectively are called the life formation messengers. And in Hebrew that word is actually malach, which is like an angel, a messenger. And it's interesting to find out that you have points that deal with descending energy and you have points that deal with ascending energy. It's a coincidence, of course. And some are on the front of the body and some are on the back of the body.
The one on the left is descending and the one on right is ascending?
Yeah, well, it actually goes by the front and the back. So all the points on the front of the back are descending and the back is ascending because the energy circulates on the body that way. It comes up your back and down your front, up your back, down the front.
So with their Kundalini and the Ascension, that's essentially their
Kundalini,
Their rip-off.
serpent spirit, is a corruption
Yeah.
of the breath of life and blood
Yeah.
governing pathway.
They're ripping that out.
And what they're doing is they're trying to get you to get into a seance so they can actually take over your communication systems.
Ew, oh my.
I've had it happen, so that's
Yeah.
why I.
They do it in
mentioned
SRA and all
Say
kinds
again?
of things. The Kundalini serpent spirit. So what they're doing is they're twisting the understanding of the breath and blood governing pathway, and they're actually inviting, they try to get you to invite an actual spirit that takes over the certain parts of your energy system. And this is not uncommon in SRA. In SRA, they know very well these points, and they will install the Kundalini serpent spirit. They install false chakras over top of the real ones, and all of that is to divert your communication from the Father to them.
Is SRA satanic ritual abuse?
Yes. And what they do to these people is insane. It's sci-fi. It is sci-fi. If you see it in sci-fi movies, it's probably real. Energy points. Maybe we have to say it here, and then if it's later, I am always ahead of myself anyways. Okay. So there are 26 points, numbered based on operating frequency. Each point is related to a Hebrew letter because of the frequency number. Each has a Hebrew name, which correlates to the meaning of that point. And collectively, they are called life formation messengers. So now in Hebrew, there's 22 letters, right? Well, there's also 5 final forms.
Right.
And I know and a lot of people who study, some people who study ancient Hebrew, says there were no final forms in the ancient Hebrew. Well, bad news, that is an opinion. Because they can't prove it. Because if I was to start drawing them out, I can show you artifacts with some of these new words, like the noon, and you can see it drawn many different ways. And some of it looks like a lightning bolt, and some of them they write it with a long lightning bolt. Now, how do you know that's not the final form? You don't. It's not absolutely proof that there's a final form, but there's no proof that it is not a final form. And with all the final forms, you can find that where the letter is drawn many ways in the pictographic form, which means some of those could have been final forms. And it brings up another question. Why did they create the final forms? Who authorized them to do that? Because when you look at them, they have meaning. So when I got to 22, I was like, uh-oh, now what do we do? Point number 23. And of course, it relates perfectly to the 5 final forms. Except for one. I wonder where that chart is. I'd like to draw it out. Maybe when we have more time, because I think we will. So, now the problem is if you add 5 final forms, you should have 27 points. But there's only 26.
And one silent.
There was one that was missing. There was one that's inactive. That's the final Zadi. And if you remember me earlier, here's a Zadi. Yeah, that's a Zadi.
Where?
Right here. This is a modern form. So you see how it looks like a man, they call it the humble man who's praying with his hands. You can see his knees bent. Well, the final Zadi looks kind of like that with a man. It looks like a Y with the hands up. And all the sages will tell you that the final Zadi represents the final righteous resurrected man. So we have points active for all the Hebrew letters except for the point that represents the righteous resurrected man.
Wow.
Coincidence?
No.
My theory, because I can't prove this, is that when Adam and Eve sinned, they turned off that point. And when Yah turns the point back on, it will absolutely change the dynamics of our body, the actual dimension of our body. Because each one of these letters is like another dimension of the human body.
So that'll be the restoration.
That will be the resurrection.
It is interesting.
In fact, I actually really know where the points are,
That's not good.
and they actually form a final body.
Where is that missing point, you think?
If you can see them, they're in purple on the body. You actually got 6 of them.
Can't see 'em.
Doctor,
Yes.
Doctor, you said, I'm just backing up a little bit, but I thought you said
Oh, I see.
the 26 energy points relate to the numbers of the Hebrew letters that relate to frequencies. Is that
Yes.
right? So you're tying the Hebrew number of the letter to a frequency,
Yep.
to the corresponding energy points, and you'll talk more about that.
Yep. We could do it right now. So, well, we have to get to the history at some point, but as this information has been brought down through different cultures, one thing that's been interesting is they have always had these points numbered. And it's not like an acupuncture. Like in acupuncture, if you have a meridian, let's say large intestine meridian that comes up from the index finger all the way up and into the gut, what they will do is they have these points, acupuncture points, on that meridian. And they just go large intestine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. However, when you look at the points on these, they have them numbered weird. Like the 1's here, and the 2's here, and the 3's here, and the 4's here, and the 5's over here, and 6's over here, and 7's over here, and 8's over here, and 9's over here, and 10. They're not in order. So you're sitting there and you go, were they on drugs? What were they doing? Well, then we find out that those numbers happen to be correlated to their operating frequency. So the points weren't numbered, they were only identified. And then when you look at the operating frequency of the points, they line up with the Hebrew letters based on numerical value. But I can also show you the other thing, as I was talking about in the first lecture about the Hebrew letters. You will find that in Hebrew letters, you have a cycle of 1 through 9. Okay? All the way through Tet. And then Yod is 10, and it goes 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. And then the next 4 letters will be 100, 200, 300, 400, ends with the Tav. But if you put in the final forms, it goes 500, 600, 700, 900. And then you have Aleph and then Aleph, which is 1,000. So it starts back over. So you have these cycles of 9 in your 1s, 10s, and 100s. And then what you will see is if you get to point 9, it's the Tet, 10 is Yod, and then 11 is Kaf. Well, it's the 11th letter, but it's the number 20. But if you know mathematical equation checking, there's a big name for it, but some people just call it the casting out of nines. I forget who came up with it, but it's a way of checking mathematical equations. Because you can always check equations by 9, because our system is 0, 9, and then 10 to 90, and then 100 to 900. So what you do is you just add up all the letter numbers and you take away until you have something 9 or less. So if you have 11 and you add the numbers up, 1 plus 1 is 2, and you're in the second cycle. So the 11th Hebrew letter and the number 20 are the same thing. So you get to the next Hebrew letter, the Lamed, it's the number 12. And its numerical value is 30. Well, 1 plus 2 is 3. It's in the second cycle. A 12 and a 30 is the same thing. And you're going to find that consistently with all the points. Because math, numbers, is all his stuff. So, how many people have heard of like muscle testing?
Yes.
Okay. And I'm assuming everyone's heard of a polygraph test. Okay, so muscle testing, how this works or ART. ART is Autonomic Response Testing. So how it works is your body is always constantly communicating with everything, and it knows everything going on inside of itself. If it didn't, you'd be dead. Because right now, your body is performing hundreds of thousands of functions right now to keep you alive that if you didn't know about, you'd be dead. Like one thing the body is constantly always doing is keeping your pH of your blood absolutely perfectly balanced. And that's why a lot of people will do a saliva and urine pH tests, because your blood pH isn't going to change. And depending on how healthy you are, if your blood is having problems keeping the pH balanced, it's going to be pulling all these minerals from all over the body into the blood, keeping the blood balanced all the time, and then your urine and saliva become too acidic or too acid. So checking urine and saliva is a way of checking how much is the body sucking up because something major is going on. And but the body knows everything, and everything Yah created in the body knows. It has its own communication system. It knows all the names of everything going on in the body. And what you can do is you can, in polygraph testing, they ask a question, a true and false question, and the person has to answer with a true and false. But subconsciously, if it's the subconscious mind or if it's really the spirit of mind, no one really knows, but subconsciously they say, we know what the real truth is. And if the person lies, what it does is it sends a negative signal throughout the body that actually weakens all your muscles. And they register that on a polygraph test. And if you tell the truth, it registers a positive, and that actually sends a signal throughout your body that strengthens your muscles. So muscle testing actually works on the same premise. Usually the person will stick their hand out, and they'll have you hold something, or they'll make a true and false statement, and your body will either stay strong or go weak based on whether it's true or false. So that's how it works. The advanced biofeedback testing that a lot of people use today is the same way. We can output frequencies and ask the body basically true or false, yes or no, and the body will respond based on that kind of communication. And it will measure very, very, instead of just measuring just a muscle test, it's measuring very minute frequency, or really it's resistance and ohms and stuff of different points on the body to get a reading, and it's kind of complicated, but it works the same way.
What's the name of that test again?
It's really any type of biofeedback that's specifically using frequency to communicate with the body. And I know there's some people out there who will say, oh, biofeedback is the devil. You realize the body has biofeedback loops. So, there's a lot of them. One of them is the serotonin and melatonin. So your pineal gland gets activated by light, and when the light comes up, the pineal gland is activated, and it goes into one of the feedback loops, and then it will start making serotonin, which is supposed to wake you up and get you going throughout the day. And when the light goes away, that stimulates the pituitary or the pineal gland to switch over from serotonin to melatonin, and then that helps you go to sleep. And then there's these feedback loops. So if something's not working back right, the body can identify it and give the feedback back to the body to try to fix it. So biofeedback is something Yah created because the body's doing it all the time. So when people say, oh, biofeedback's Satan, and that's witchcraft, you shouldn't use it, it's like, are you that dumb? I mean, some of these people saying this are studying biology, and they come on Facebook and they attack me, and I'm like, you are a moron. You're studying the biology books. You didn't see the biofeedback loops? Biology, body, hello. So all these devices are doing are communicating the way the body communicates. We're just looking at his creation and copying it and using it to communicate with the body. And what you can do is what I had to do originally, as after I identified all the points related to the Hebrew letters, I had to come up with pages and pages and pages of every single word I could think of related to that Hebrew letter and that number. And then I would feed it through this machine, testing one point at a time, saying, this name or this word is related to the name of this point. And it would go through no, 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 yes, no, 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 yes. Well, that'd be interesting. So I'd put those two words together, and then boom, that would be the name of that point. So that's how we get the names of all the points in the pathways. It's by testing the body and finding out what's true and false through the body. And then with muscle testing is tricky because with muscle testing, you want to stick to people who will use either put something in your hand and you test it, and you see your body's reaction to it, or they're using statements, true and false statements. I try to stay away from people who want to start asking questions. You don't want to ask questions because then it gets into a really big problem. Who are you asking? And usually if you start asking questions, you start getting beyond true and false, and you get into all this weird stuff, and then you can get into the divination. You have to just stick to how the body really works. True, false, yes, no. That's about as far, and it has to be something the body actually knows. You can't ask, 10 years from now, you don't know that yet. You can't ask that. Does that make sense? You don't want to get into the witchcraft part of it, which people do sometimes.
What's your opinion in that technique? What's your opinion of being able to use a parent to like
A
hold
surrogate?
onto a surrogate?
No, that's true.
With a small child and how effective that is?
No, it's
or
just as effective.
it doesn't degrade the
Mm-mm.
integrity of the
Nope. We can go back to like old science experiments. I don't know if you've ever done them, but you know, like the static electricity generators where the one person touches it and everyone joins hands, and it gets everyone all the way down the line. Yeah, so that's what surrogate is. If I'm testing her, I know I can be the surrogate. And someone could test me, but they're actually testing her. Yeah, it's all electromagnetism. It's getting cold. What? Right now. Oh, that's interesting. Someone's trying to interfere. Okay. Primary pathways. So this is actually the very first pathway in the body, the primary pathway. And as you can see, it all starts with the belly button, which is symbolic. And then it comes out and it goes down one arm and comes back up the back. So the dotted line is looking through the body. That would be on the back side. So then it comes back up, and then it goes down one of the legs, and then back up the back side of the leg. And then there's a center line too. So that is actually the breath of light, life primary pathway.
Like chi.
A what?
Like Tai Chi.
Yeah. Where they base a lot of stuff. And this is why you have a negative polarity hand and a positive polarity hand. And then this would actually be negative and positive. And then if you go from poles, the feet are negative and then that's positive. Negative. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Hopefully it won't rabbit trail.
No.
The plus sign, that's your right hand. So the right hand, in scripture, we see it all the time, placing the right hand. Is that an energy thing, do you think?
It could be.
Yeah. It's all connected. But it is your right hand, correct? It's plus.
The right hand is positive,
Yeah.
and the left hand is negative.
Well, for people who are left-handed,
Yeah.
people who are left-handed, is that?
Nope, still the same. Yep.
That's awesome. Is that why they put essential oils in the button?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why it's effective.
And then symbolically, if you think about it, our connection, when we are born, our connection to the mother is through the umbilical cord, and this is the connection to the source of the creator. So there's this symbolism here. So it's actually really only one pathway, but it's the breath of light and the breath of life, and it kind of divides and keeps coming back together as one. And then you get the three pathways, which is the life cycle governing pathway, which runs up and down the middle of the body. So after this makes one full rotation and comes back to the belly button, and then it breaks off and it makes a cycle again straight down the middle of the body, and that's the life cycle governing pathway, which is also what creates the wheels of light, which are not chakras. They call them chakras, but they're not. And then that splits off and creates the life creation governing pathway, one on the left side and one on the right side. And they kind of govern their side of the body. So usually when a person has more problems on one side of the body than another, predominantly, it usually comes back to the life cycle governing pathway, because that's what it's supposed to be doing, is governing that side of the body. And then that splits off and becomes the breath and blood governing pathway, which is what connects the life cycle and the life creation pathways together. And it kind of zigzags back and forth, like we were speaking about, and it makes sure that both sides of the body are communicating correct and everything is working. It connects the breath of life to the body's lungs and the blood. So you get all this some symbolism that occurs eventually here, and we're going to get into. Collectively, they are called, well, I already told you that, primary pathways, governing pathways. Now we get the messenger pathways, which collectively are called messenger pathways. And they are responsible for carrying information throughout the body from the life formation messengers throughout the body. So they go through the points, they pick up information, and they carry them somewhere else. There are 4 sets of 3. This is really interesting. 3 of them start in the chest, 3 start in the feet, 3 start in the hands, and 3 start in the face. What is that? What do you think of when you think of that? What? Oh!
The 4 sets of the tribes.
4 tribes,
Ooh.
which makes 12.
Wow.
So messenger pathways are very similar to meridians, except they are much deeper, much less manifested. And from my understanding, they would be considered plasma energy in the body. So messenger pathways are broadcasting channels of the body, and they carry the information from the points. As they begin to manifest, they begin to make up the other energy systems of the body, like meridians, which is a liquid solid. For those of you who don't know, I probably keep getting over too far for you. They now kind of really know what the meridians are. Meridians are water crystal molecules found in your connective tissue. And what happens is energy is being carried from one water crystal to the other in your connective tissue. So that's what the meridians actually are. And what's interesting, has anyone ever seen the magnet, little magnet, not the, well, you could say iron filaments. When you stick a magnet to it and they all line up.
Yeah.
Now, if you take a magnet off, what happens? They all fall apart. And this is exactly what they find happens with these pathways when you die. When you die and the energy is turned off, these water crystals just all disperse and fall apart. But as soon as you apply the circuit back, they all line up like a magnet going through. And that's how the energy is traveling through the body. Eventually, these pathways, along with the life formation messengers and the 7 cycles of life manifestation, combine to manifest all levels of the energetic and physical body. This is the actual names of the 12. So you have arm and bowel messenger pathway, breath messenger pathway. They're both in the 2nd cycle. The mouth and consumption messenger pathway, immune vitality messenger pathway, sound and assimilation, heart, head and vision messenger pathway, the blood messenger pathway, the water fertility messenger pathway, the kidney messenger pathway. And then in 6th cycle, you have the spiritual life and physical life manifestation, or messenger pathway. So those are actually the names of the 12 pathways, kind of where they begin. AC/DC means descending and ascending energy, not AC/DC current.
How did you?
Not as in.
The names of the pathways, you got that through
Testing.
The Hebraic
Yep.
word testing, the yes, no on the Greek.
Yeah, these are the English translations. I tested them in Hebrew. And then I had to test them in English to get the best English word and the best Hebrew word.
Do you have the Hebrew word
Yep.
list? I'd love to
Oh
see
yeah,
that.
they will all be in my book. Yep.
Can you
Absolutely.
walk us through one of the tests, like how exactly you did that?
So one, you hook a person up to a machine, and then you have a thing on one of the points. So we're giving the body, the machine the machine is loaded with the names, all the names that I wrote on the piece of paper, with a statement that says this point's name or this pathway's name is made up of the following word. And it goes through each word, yes or no, yes or no, yes or no. And so it's testing the body specifically, is this a name of this point? And the body knows, so the body actually reveals the names of the pathways and points. And then what gets really, really interesting, which will also be in the book, is once you have it in Hebrew, and you put it in the pictographic form, and then you do a little ciphering where you break down what that word means by looking at what the meaning of each pictograph is. Woo. Really powerful thing.
So when you're testing, what stimulus and what response are you measuring when you go?
It's all set up based on the original, what's his name? Vol. You remember if I talked about Dr. Vol yesterday, I think?
You mean measuring voltage?
No. Dr. Vol was, he was the guy who measured the acupuncture points.
What is he measuring?
He's actually measuring resistance through a channel.
So is that a resistance, or is it capacitive and inductive too, or is it?
Both. So you put energy into a channel, and then you measure the energy coming out of that channel.
Okay. So coherence, like capacitive induction, will phase shift a signal.
Yes.
Does that come to play in this, or is that?
Yeah, to a degree. And if something is going to cause if something causes more resistance in that pathway, then the number coming out and the number going in is going to be different. So you're measuring the resistance of what's going in and coming out. Does that make sense? Like an electrical circuit.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
And what he found was another thing that he found that was really interesting that led to a lot of the muscle testing was when he was testing people and he was testing a meridian, he got baselines that certain pathways and certain systems, because all the meridians go to an organ. So you can test that organ by that pathway. And he found that there was a chart that he came up with that healthy organs would measure between 45 and 55. And then if they were unhealthy, it would be below 45, would be very weak and a lack of flow. And then if they were real too high, over 55, it would be stressed and inflamed. And then he found something really interesting. He'd be testing people, and he'd be testing a point, and all of a sudden the numbers would change. And he kept seeing it happen, and then he started watching to see what was happening, and what happened is people were grabbing supplements off his shelf. And when they picked up the supplement, the number changed. And it was the first documented evidence that we found out that as soon as you touch something, your body is already interacting with the frequencies, and your body already knows exactly how that substance is going to work for your body.
So you believe in reflexology?
Yes.
So
Reflexology?
Back up to how you
Is that real?
define
Is that-
the word
Yes.
manifest.
Manifest. So when I'm using the word manifest, I'm talking about how something goes from spiritual into light, and then the light, which is kind of like the ether, starts becoming plasma, gas, liquid, solid. So it becomes eventually something tangible that we can see. So that's what I mean by manifesting.
So do you have like a schematic of the human body that models what it should be, the sweet spot in all these measurements, or is that?
Yeah, to a degree. I think I know what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I have all the pathways and everything mapped out.
Right, I mean, I just see like a big electrical circuit that should have the right parameters, and when we eat
Yep.
things that we shouldn't or consume things that we shouldn't, we corrupt those
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
circuits.
And the fact that we know that we shouldn't can affect our health as well.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, because like if you were able to make like a body almost invisible, but only see all the energy pathways, it would look like a man.
Say that again.
If you were able to make the body like invisible except for the energy pathways, and you were able to like highlight all the energy pathways, you would look like a man standing there. Because the pathways are so numerous and
would have shape.
It's very quite fascinating. All right, where are we? This is just more summary. I think you guys get it. So the 5 are physical, meaning they control the physical functions that make up physical bodies, parts. So some cycles govern the blood, the bone, the muscle, the skin, etc. 2 are more spiritual, which of course is the 6th and 7th. 6 being the spiritual, and the breath of life, and 7th being the source, which is also the light. And everything is held together by Yeshua, the Aleph Tav. That is nothing for you. Yeah, that's just something I've been working on. How
How
to
does
put
this all play into like the resurrected body, the glorified, like Yeshua, how
yeah.
they didn't recognize him until they touched him, and like
Yep.
how does that play into all this? Like I'm assuming it's that switch, that one that's not turned on.
Yeah, I mean, if you turn on the points that's not turned on, you're going to have a major change to the body.
Yeah,
Because, I mean, it almost adds another dimension.
but it's physical,
But you're
Yeah,
still physical,
it's-
but it's not.
but it's not. Like it's gonna be.
It's that final form, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that final
lower
form that we can't explain because
Yeah. the
we're stuck in
the
this.
resurrected bodies.
how are we on time? What time did we start?
1:30.
1:30. This says 3:30, which means it's actually
You're at an
2:30.
hour scale.
So we still have a half hour, right? For the first part. Good. So we're going to go into a little bit of some examples.
What does LFM stand for?
Life Formation Messenger. So we're going to talk about the Aleph Point, the Lamed, the Mem, Tet, and then I'm going to show you a little bit of the third cycle pathways, just as some examples. And then if we have extra time, we're going to get into some other rabbit holes, and then the next session we're going to actually show how you can actually place your hands on the body to help correct things. So we're going to go through a lot of the emergency procedures.
Your own or someone else's?
Or both.
Or both?
Yeah.
It works for everyone the same.
No, I mean like you can do it to yourself.
You can do it yourself, or someone else can do it to you. Some of them, obviously, someone else is going to do to you. Because if you're having a heart attack, you can kind of apply it, but you're probably too busy having a heart attack. And if you're having a seizure, it's probably the same thing. But there will be things for seizures, heart attacks, choking, anaphylactic shock, burns, you name it.
Does a heart attack go back to the neck and wrist?
Pretty close, yep.
Close to her.
So the Aleph Point. The Aleph Point is right in the inside of the knee. And if you remember now, the very first teaching I did on the Hebrew letters, the Aleph means first, strong, strength. And obviously knees have to be really strong. It's where your strength comes from. The Aleph has a lot to do as far as a command center with movement in the body. That's its main function. In fact, its name is prime mover in English. In Hebrew, it's Rosh Bara, I think, which it really means prime creator. But the connotation in English that was best is movement, which is very interesting because if you remember when we go back to Genesis, the first thing we saw Yah doing was moving on the waters. And then you start getting all the symbolism of the Aleph. So if I was going to ask, what's the first thing you have to do to move, to walk? What do? Do you do this? No, you don't pick up your feet. You have to bend your knee. The knee has to bend. So the Aleph is at the knee. So symbolically, the Aleph has to do with anything in the body that's not moving. If there's any issue with you not being able to move in life, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, it's an Aleph issue. Thinking of bending the knee, that's an Aleph issue. Who do we bend the knee to? The Aleph. It's all symbolic. Flexibility, knee problems, elimination problems, anything to do with the Aleph. So the self-help for that is you simply can cross your hands and touch the opposite ones. You just touch both ones, and opposite is usually better. You can probably do same side, but opposite's usually better, and that will help that point. That's the short way of doing it. And then there's longer versions, which usually, most of the longer versions are designed for someone else working on you because it's usually points that you can't reach. But, and the short ones are more of the self-help ones that you can do to yourself. So that's a way to touch the ones. And what is it going to help? Well, anything on that list. And you can expand your minds to think of anything that would be related to movement in the body. So let's say you're constipated. Is that a movement problem? Yes. You're stuck in life wherever you are, and let's say you're having a hard time doing something, and you're stuck, mentally, emotionally. A 1 would help. You physically have a problem moving, or you have a problem with your knee, that a 1 would help.
Would this have, if you have artificial knees, does this have anything to do with it?
Yes. If you have a replacement knee or an artificial knee, you really need to work on it to keep the energy moving through the ones.
You said on our left and right hand we have negative and positive, right?
Yep.
Is it negative and positive knees as well? On one side of the body is
Technically.
and you're putting the opposite to each, and it's helping.
Yeah, well, what happens is you could put them both ways, but depending on how you put in the negative and positive, depending on how the energy circulates, because what's going to happen is it's going to work on the same principles of all electrical circuits. So energy is going to take the path of least resistance. So where you place your hands, the energy moves based on whatever pathway is closest to those 2 points, because that would be the path of least resistance. So based on how you place your hands on the body, when you do the opposite on this point, it's going to be more thorough in how the energy circulates, versus if you did the same side, it would be a little bit less thorough because the energy wouldn't travel as far. It gets complicatedly simple.
Oh, that makes sense.
How long do you need to work?
Oh, how long? Well, if you're working on yourself, the minimum always is 5 to 10 minutes. However, when you're working on yourself, there really is no maximum. More the better. This is an American thing. Just go at it. More the better.
Sit and watch a movie and.
You can sit and watch a movie. You can hold them all day. It's just going to keep working and working and working in deeper and deeper levels. You just keep doing it. Now, if other people work on you, it's a little bit different because it's much longer, and you probably don't want someone working on you all day unless it's chronic or critical. If a person's in the hospital and dying, I'm going to work on them all day until they get back up.
Do you think if a sick person puts their hands on you, it can make you sick? Do you think that their
I don't think
spiritual
so.
life can, no, just on a body level, pretty much?
Well, that's because I pray all the time for protection and all kinds of other stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you?
There's no giving or taking of disease or energy
Not by sick, I meant like sick spiritual.
with this.
Yeah.
You're really not taking or receiving any energy from the other person. You're just acting. A jumper cable is kind of a crude analogy because in a jumper cable the energy actually goes through, but in this situation you're just acting as a stimulation with a positive negative charge on a circuit that already exists in the body. So that's stimulating the body to move based on the positive and negative polarity.
Makes sense.
Right. So the energy doesn't go through you
So,
necessarily.
can you go to the next point if you're missing that point?
No one's missing that point.
How about a double amputee? I mean.
The point's still there.
Still there.
It is.
Yep.
Where is it at?
Phantom scratching, that's itches.
Yep. Wherever the knee would normally be, you would still go there, and you will still get pulses, and you still get the energy circulating, and then you can turn off the phantom pain, because the phantom pain is telling you that the energy is not circulating, and thus you get the signal pain.
Even without touching skin, like
Right,
she said,
Yep. Even without touching skin.
Like what if they were cut off right here, you would go to where in the air, where
Yep.
your knee would have been.
Yep.
Now, you think clothes can,
Now that's crazy, but
can clothes block the signal?
huh?
Can clothing block the signal? Can you?
No, not necessarily. Usually when I work on people, I try to get them to wear the most natural fabrics possible and take off all their metal and all that stuff. But it's not going to stop it from working. It just slows it up a little. So like hospitals are like the worst situation ever because they have all this synthetic and they have metals and they have stuff beeping everywhere and they putting poison in you, and that makes it a lot harder to work on people when they're in the hospital. So typically when you are getting worked on, we try to get you in the best situation possible, but no, it won't stop it from working. It will just slow it down a little bit and you just work through it. The Mem. And don't you love the pictures?
Yes.
So this is the final part, which last year when I met Michael Solomon at Take on the World Conference. So if you guys need graphic arts and stuff, check out Michael Solomon. He does 3D animation, and he was able to make me 3D anatomically correct images of the body. And of course, this is turned into 2D. But if I ever want to animate the body, which eventually I do, so people can see the energy actually flowing in a 3D fashion. So it was money well spent, perfect, anatomically correct, and then I've just been editing, putting the points on and everything. So check out Michael Solomon. He's on YouTube and everything. He has his own ministry too. It's really kind of cool. And so this is the first time I've actually used these images in my presentation. I've been working on them like crazy to try to get the book ready. But that's the Mem. The Mem is about an inch above the nipple, so basically you start coming down, you will find a little indent right in between these ribs. And it's usually about an inch above or half an inch above the nipple. That's your Mems. And Mem, of course, in Hebraic, you remember, is the middle letter. And it looks like water. So in this way of drawing it, you can kind of see how it looks like a wave coming up and over. So it's Mem. It almost looks like a womb enclosed. So Mem in Hebrew has all these concepts of mother, monarch, birthing. So of course it has everything to do with fertility in the body, male or female. So infertility issues, the Mem is a huge point to work on. Anything to do with pregnancy, menopause, menses, mensitis, thyroid, adrenals, the thymus, empathy, yes, thank you. Multiple personality disorder, or SRA, or DID.
What's DID?
Yep, dissociated disorder.
Do you need to be skin on skin for this? Or
No,
is
you don't
it
have to be
your
skin on
clothes?
skin. You can go right through close.
Okay.
In fact, you can go all the way through like a cast.
Can you cross your hands like this on that? Like, can you demonstrate
Like
that?
that? Like this?
Mem, I'd probably just hold same
Okay,
side.
just like that.
And then there's other points that you could do the work on the Mems, but this is probably a good one, just holding same side.
Do you know how long you have to work on something before it actually changes?
Well, that is a question. And that changes for each person. Depends how congested the body is and how many points are congested. And some things can take years, and some things can be one session.
SH.
I do notice though, oh, did I spell something wrong?
No, it's self-help. Thank you.
Oh. Well, I would be surprised if I spelled something wrong, because spelling is not my thing. Remember, phonics didn't work for me. But, what was I going to say? Oh, I have noticed, though, that early on I worked primarily more on, well, I work on a lot of unbelievers, of course, because I get all kinds of crazy in my office. And trust me, from the Satanists to the abductees to just all kinds of stuff. But for a long time I worked on a lot of Christians too. And then when I got into Torah and I started working on people who actually keep Torah, I found it was quite a difference on the speed in which people recover for people who actually keep Torah versus people who don't.
Really? They're more in line with the laws of
Yes.
creation.
It actually works faster,
Yeah.
for sure.
Interesting.
So there's another self-help for the 13s. You hold index and little finger. So you just kind of get both of those and you hold both of them at the same
I know,
time.
we're sitting there going,
We were trying to touch them together and we're like.
Nope. Hold them both at the same time.
Okay. We were doing some.
Either hand.
We all throwing some gang signs over here.
It's Illuminati.
Okay, so does that self-help feel what?
So you had a question?
I have a question here.
Go ahead first and then here.
What you said a minute ago about the Torah, I was curious if you've done any documentation on rest and the Sabbath and how that affects these circuits and
Some.
with stress, side
Some.
by side. What happens to these circuits when we rest? Do they become uncongested or?
Yeah, that helps greatly. In fact, there seems to be patterns, like we were talking about the clothes thing with the mixed fabrics, and there seems to be cycles of 7 where the body almost resets. It's complicated. I would have to look at my notes too, because I do so much testing and experiments that I'd have to go. But I do remember there was a thing where it would build up for so long, but then it could actually reset. It was interesting. I can't remember all of it now. I'd have to look at my notes. But yeah.
And the Shabbat is such a big deal.
And little by
It has
little,
an impact on our physical body.
as I get more time and more money, I do more different experiments and stuff, but usually everything just comes out of my pocket. So it's been, sometimes I'm limited at how much testing and experiments and double-blind studies I can do. But I have done a lot of them over the last 10 years. Or, you have a question first?
That's okay, either way.
Go ahead.
Okay. Maybe I should stand by the back door while I say this, but I want to, and it sounds like a lot of people here have read some of your stuff or followed your videos, and I have not a clue.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that I'm a complete cynic, but at the same time, I want to use my brain.
Mm-hmm.
And who are you, like earlier you were saying, well, they named these, who's they? And who else is studying this? And who are you working with? And I need to know.
The history.
Okay, yes. And I know you went over it a little bit yesterday, and you talked about some of the doctors and different things that were studying some of these things. And I'm not saying this doesn't exist, because I know that certain therapies work, and certain, I'm a great believer in massage and some reflexology and things like that. And I understand what you're talking about in terms of, and I see how God has put order to everything in the universe. But is anybody else working on this with you? Is anybody else doing this? Do you use this for diagnosing as well as treating, or just treating? And I think the cold air in here is making me really cranky. I think it just got better.
I think they finally turned it up. I don't know what that was.
They did, but it's still
They
blowing.
probably cranked it down for the wedding.
There's a wind chill factor in here.
I mean, I realize you're trying to pack a ton of information.
I'll get to the history here in a couple minutes.
Short time, but I hear you making statements and no one challenging them, and I want to know who's challenged you and how have you answered that?
Oh, I get challenged every day, nonstop, for the last 10 years of my life.
Is there anybody else using this type of a system?
Yes.
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 But aren't you also a
So
past
let me go through history real quick. So this system was rediscovered in Japan. And from Japan it came to America, and it goes, in America there's only 2 other organizations teaching this. One's called Jinsenjutsu, which is a very new age. And the other one's TKM, which is the King Institute method. The King Institute method are kind of more Christian based. I studied both of them originally. And then I separated from them when I realized that these were Hebrew points and I went back and I looked at the original, because I still have original manuscripts from Japan. Now, when you go back to Yarrow, who was in Japan, he will tell you that their history is that this information was brought to them from tribesmen, and that they could trace it back to Moses. And it's all Hebraic, if you have eyes to see. In fact, a lot of the Japanese, well, there's different Japanese people over there, but a large group of them are actually some of the lost tribes. I don't know, when people seen the research on that, a lot of Japanese words are identical to Hebrew words.
Yeah.
And they actually have a lot of ceremonies, just like the Native Americans, that are almost identical. They have a fall feast for 7 days where they only eat rice cakes. They have mock sacrifices where they take a person and bind them and carry them up the mountain to sacrifice them, and they let them go. They do all kinds of things because there is a Hebrew flux, which they actually came from Isaac over to Japan. Not all the Japanese, but some of them. And you can tell they look different. They usually have the longer beards. They kind of almost look more Jewish, Japanese Jewish. And so this information, I believe, was originally well known. And because of our disobedience, he hid it. And now all of a sudden, it's coming up. So that's kind of the history. And even the names, they named them, like Jinsen Jitsu. If you break it down, it basically means the breath of life work or a gift. Well, there's different versions. One's Jinsen Jitsu, and they have a couple other names. But one name actually means the breath of life work. Another one means a gift from the Creator to man and all his kind. And so there's all these names, even in the in the Japanese. It was like, very interesting. Yeah, so that's the history of how it came through, and I'll have a whole chapter in my book in more detail on the history and quotations and all that stuff.
Do the animals, like, say our pets, our dogs, our cats, do they have other systems?
They're slightly different.
I would suspect.
If you go to like Jinsen Jitsu or TKM, they're gonna say it's the exact same points, just different locations on the body. I don't believe that. Both of those systems have a lot of stuff wrong, a lot of stuff that was just made up. Because both Jinsen Jitsu and TKM, the biggest problems with them is they have been passed on as an art. So it was all based on what you could feel and sense, and there was really no way of proving right or wrong on anything. It was just the empirical results of people getting better, and people just made up a lot of stuff. Once I was able to start testing things, then I started a long process of cutting out and formatting everything to find out, okay, what was true, what's not, what's true, what's not, because you really don't know when you don't have a system that you can test. When it's all just by touch and feeling, it's like, okay, that's nice, but you can't quantitate anything, you can't quantify anything, you just make up stuff. So the Jinsen Jitsu stuff is really crazy. I think the back one first and then you.
So if somebody was to do this regularly,
Yep.
they still have to take the medication that their, say, primary doctor?
No.
Do you have any books with you?
No.
You got
2 or 3 more months.
2 months.
I've been saying that for 5 years, but no, for serious. 2 or 3 more months I have to be done. And then I have to figure out how I'm going to publish. I don't know. I'm throwing around the Amazon idea, but then I don't like the Amazon idea. Did you publish a book? You didn't publish a book. Oh, I'll ask you. You had a question.
I just wanted you to repeat the whole index, the whole thing you were explaining it, I couldn't hear you.
Oh, so you literally just grab both, and you're holding both at the same time. However, you can kind of do that.
Okay,
Now,
what's the SH?
this was about the 1 inch from the
Self-help.
the-
Okay.
This was about the 1 inch from the nipple. That's the
Yes.
self-help
Yes.
but it's still Mem.
If it's still Mem.
The Mem pathway.
Yep.
Okay.
You don't always have to touch the letter you're working on to affect that letter, because of how the circuits are. Yeah. And how many people are familiar with not Russ Dizdar?
Through the black.
No, the other guy talks about Nephilim. He's not Torah. L.A. Mazzulli.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay, how many people have seen L.A. Mizzuli's presentations?
Some.
Okay, so you're familiar with a lot of the SRA and other satanic things going on. There have been instances where people have been kidnapped and their bodies found, they're dead, and they have surgical procedures done to them that cannot be explained because tissue has been removed, but it's like they lost no blood. Doctors don't know how to describe it.
Mutilations, yeah.
Mutilations. And one of the locations that you're always going to see missing on these people is a perfect circle right there and there.
Where? Real?
Yep. You can ask L.A. Marzulli. And I came up to him one time and I said, I can tell you why they're cutting this point out.
Tell us.
Because they're trying to recreate reproduction. It's all transhumanism now.
They're trying to corrupt the seed.
Yes.
Exactly.
The new form of nephilim is much more advanced. It's not just angels having sex with men anymore. They're using computers and they're birthing people in artificial labs, and it's insane what's really going on. But yeah, they take these points out and they usually take a point over on the face.
How is this different from acupuncture?
These eventually create all the acupuncture points. So acupuncture points cannot affect these points. But these points will correct all the acupuncture points.
Oh.
So you really don't even need acupuncture if you know this.
This is better.
Wow.
This is better.
On the self-help, does it matter which hand?
Doesn't matter.
Which hand, or does it alternate?
Doesn't matter. I would do so long in one hand, so long in the other hand. Yes.
My grandson has 22q deletion syndrome, which is, the
Chromosome 22?
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. Are you saying that this could possibly help him
Yes.
to restore the things that are wrong?
Yes.
From your
Like,
book, from your
I
book,
mean,
right?
he had to have open heart surgery because he had the aortic arch was missing and things like that in his body.
I had open heart surgery too.
Wow. Wow.
There's nothing that can't be reversed. However, I will say this. As soon as you let man cut on you, you can never make it like it wasn't done. That seems to be the rule. As soon as they cut, you're never going to restore fully. If you don't let them cut, you can have complete restoration. But once they cut,
surgery, so.
all you can do is get him back into a maintenance level, and you have to keep it going because you're always going to have that scar tissue. Like I have a scar from here to here, and I always have to work on keeping those pathways flowing. It's just something.
Side question you don't have to answer now because I know you want to get through it and it's live and stuff, but do you think there's a scientific reason why Christ didn't have his bones broken and things like that? Perhaps? Or,
Not one of his bones.
I don't know.
Of course, he measures the
I'm
sacrifice
sure there's
after
something
birth.
there, and I'll have to think about it, but
Just a thought.
possibly. The Lamed. And I think we're still doing pretty good. Oh, well, we probably need to wrap this up, that's okay. I'm almost done. So, and then we're going to go into the next one. So the Lamed is actually on the neck. This is another really interesting one. So you find the earlobe, you come right down, right in that sternocleidomastoid. You will notice the Lamed is a shepherd's staff. So it has a lot to do with how you're being led, a shepherd, guiding. It has a lot to do with the will. That's what number 12 means in Scripture. So you're going to see it has a lot to do with stubbornness, willfulness, digestive functions, cervical 4, which is, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, right on the sides of it, sciatic, stiff neck. So this is an interesting point because it's the Lamed. The name for this point is the will of authority. So it talks about your will. And if your will is not in line with his, this point gets congested, and that will stiffen your neck and give you headaches and make you more stubborn and hard-minded, and it will stiffen your upper necks, and you become a stiff-necked people. So I don't think they were just called stiff-necked people. I think they literally had stiff necks, because that's exactly what this pain point does. And if it gets really bad, then he gives you a pain in the butt, because you are a pain in the butt.
I resemble that remark.
And it will be opposite side. Oh yeah, there's a whole thing on body reading, where I can literally look at the shape of bodies and know a lot about you just by your shape. That's a whole nother story. Yes.
Self-help number 12 and number 3.
Yes.
Which is?
And SS means same side. So this is 12. This is 3 back here. So you're doing this. So you just cross your hand over, and you're going to be on the 3 and the 12 on the same side.
You need to be on Rob Stewart's show.
He's been asking me about that for a long time.
The criminal behavior, and you talk about it.
Oh, so, yeah, because, well, there's 2 things here. One's criminal behavior and one's another one, which is a 23. 23 is right about here. And that's the point that is probably most related to fear, the 23s. And when the 23 is really congested, and a 12 on the same side is really congested, and the person's talking suicidal, that's the person you don't let leave. Because they have the will to take their life. So when you find 12 and 23 on the same side congested, yeah, they don't leave my office until that's corrected. Because they will actually have the will now and the power to carry out not just an empty threat. Since the 12 has so much to do with will, it has a lot to do with criminal behavior, but it has to do with the 4s too, because 4s are on the back of the skull, and it's called the doorway of the mind, because it's the point that controls the pathways into the mind. And when the 4s and the 12s are congested, then you can have a lot of criminal behavior and violence. Violence is different between one point's inward violence and one's outward violence, which also relates to autism. There's a lot there, but yeah, it gets complicatedly simple again.
So if you're having issues with those that are on that list and you touch the 12 and 3, if it hurts, is that like?
That's probably an indication you need it more.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, 12 will affect the opposite 9, which then affects same side leg. So technically, a 12 on the left will cause sciatic on the right. But usually that is the cause, is the 12. There's the 10, there's the 9. So this is like the basket, right? And the snake or whatever, but the basket, what you're carrying. So you're going to find the 9s are very highly related to what you're not letting go of, what you're carrying in your basket. So sinuses. Sinuses is another symbolic issue of the body that says you're not letting go. Asthma. Asthma is symbolic. Most asthma attacks happen with fear. I don't know how many people have been in some type of martial arts somewhere in their life. You ever noticed a lot of people have asthma attacks in martial arts? I did, yeah. We used to teach martial arts all the time. For little kids, a lot of people would get asthma attacks because a lot of asthma attacks are related to fear. And then not letting go makes it worse, because what happens is you get hard to breathe and you go, and you hold on. What the problem is you have, is it Hering's Law? No, someone, yeah, there was a doctor named Hering, I think it's Hering's Law. Basically says that when the pressure is greater on the outside than the inside of the lungs, the air is forced in. And when it's greater on the inside than the outside, it comes out. So if you're not able to breathe and you hold on and it's equalized, you will never get air in and out. The way you get to breathe again is you have to completely let go. And if you can let go of the fear and get the breath out, you will get another breath in. Which is also symbolic of the fact that he always is providing our breath, but we can hold on. And if we hold on, he will not provide the next. So there's all this symbolism. Hypertensions, Leukemia. The 9 is the cause for leukemia. In fact, when they do autopsies with people with leukemia, they'll find all the white corpuscles right here. Probably just a coincidence.
What's the 14 and the 19? Self-help?
14, 19. So opposites? Yeah. Yeah, because kind of hard to do your own 9s. So this is another one, let go and let someone help you. 9s. So another version of helping the 9s is things on the same level of the body. So if you want to do, and here's another thing, usually typically the left side of the body is going to be past and the right side is going to be present because of the way the energy circulates. So usually if the 9 is the problem on the left, it's going to be letting go of the past, and if it's on the right, it's letting go of something in the present. Not always written in stone, but typically. So if you wanted to do the left 9, it would be the left 19, which is right up here, kind of like an Indian stance. So you're going to be touching that 19, and your 14 is at the bottom of the rib cage. So you're touching those 2 locations. And that would help the left 9. So whatever 19 you're doing, that's the side you're working on.
If you're working on somebody else and you want to hit those 2 points, do you do the opposite hands like you did on the knees?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
I would still do this.
Can you cause damage by being off
Nope.
from the points?
No, there's like a 5-inch diameter of effective range, which is pretty huge. You almost can't miss. Lupus related, letting go.
Now, could you show me that self-help again, please?
Right here, right before the bend, and then right at the bottom of the rib cage. Yep.
Can I ask you a question about the suicide thing? You said you wouldn't let him leave the office.
Yeah.
So how do you know it's fixed?
Well, I can tell by pulses. Each cycle has its own pulse texture, which is actually symbolic for the emotion related.
And that shows you the congestion or not.
So when you're holding 2 points, once you get used to it, you will eventually start feeling pulses. And they're not cardiovascular, and they're going to change. And they can feel anything from electrical to a dead beat drum to cardiovascular to almost like a puffed up balloon to like water flowing over pebbles to, there's all these different textures. Those are the different cycles you're feeling as they're cycling through. So, blood messenger pathway and the head and vision messenger pathway. So this is all third cycle pathways. And if you combine them all together, third cycle governs the blood. It's also related to anger, liver, gallbladder, head, eyes, brain, ears. There are opposite in colors, red and green. Technically, third cycle is green. But when you put these 2 pathways together, you're going to find something very interesting. They go through the right big toe, they go through the right thumb, and they go through the right earlobe. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
And the priest shall take some of the blood of the trespass offering, and the priest shall put it upon the tip of the right ear of him who be cleansed, and on the right thumb, and on the right big toe. And you just happen to have a pathway that's related to blood, and anger, and frustration, and liver, and sight, and heart, and brain. That's literally what those pathways look like. And now what's interesting is colors work on opposites because of frequency. So that one video explained, if you're looking at a leaf, the reason why it looks green to you is because it reflects that nanometer of light. But the vibration of the leaf is actually operating at a vibrational frequency, probably of red. And so if you just think of blood, it's very interesting. Blood has a greenish blue look until it hits the air, and then it becomes red. And that's because when it hits the air, what's being reflected is the red. But when it's in the body, you don't get the reflection, you're just seeing the vibrational frequency. Just a coincidence.
Okay, you were actually saying right, but you were pointing to the left side of that body. Is it because it's the right to the person that's facing them?
That's the left hand, right.
What
It's
happened
the
to my
left
drawing?
thumb. It's the left thumb and the right toe. Yeah, on this side.
Yeah.
Right here.
It is showing the size base.
Any pictures, Mom?
Yeah, we just screwed up the whole presentation.
No, that's for later. You're gonna have to get to that.
No.
Fix that.
The person is facing them. Right.
Well, actually, correctly, and I should say this anyways, these drawings are usually only one side, so all these pathways are on both sides of the body. They're bilateral. The same thing with the points. So you have the same pathway go through both toes, both thumbs, and both earlobes. But that is not right. I either drew it wrong or got transposed, or I better not drew it wrong.
Better now than in the book.
Yeah.
See, now I'm actually thinking it is supposed to be in the right hand. Did I draw that wrong? Damn.
That's the left.
You're not perfect?
Yeah, this got flipped because it's supposed to start in the left toe and then come into the right thumb. And this one is right. So this one is correct, but this one got flipped. Weird. Well, I'm gonna have to go figure that one out
It's a left one.
They were pre-QCing the book.
before I put it in the book.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's actually it. So let's take a quick break and then we're gonna do more.